What is up? Good morning. Welcome to Monday's Hangxiety. Just last week, my co-host Josh was bitching about there being two Monday night football games. But as I looked at my leagues, I think the NFL might have done this with fantasy football in mind. It is week 14. We are fighting for our final playoff spot, and you get not one, but two chances at Monday miracles. Let's get into it. What is up? Good morning and welcome to Monday's Hangxiety. I am your host, Ryan Weisse. With me, as always, Josh Hudson. This is our weekly recap show where we are going to look back at the previous week's action and let you know when it is time to panic and when it is time to chill the fuck out. Josh, another rough Monday for Eagles fans. Obviously, we're going to get into that later, but you as a person, Josh Hudson, how are you doing today?
I've been sick for the past week, so that's been fun. And then, of course, last night was just the cherry on top of my shit.
Well, I was going to say, I think it's not a coincidence you've been sick for the past week.
In fairness, I've been saying the Eagles would lose to Dallas for weeks now.
You did. You've been predicting this for months.
Yeah. I was like, the moment that we beat them in Philly, I said they're going to beat us at home. Dallas is a fantastic team at home, and they showed it. Like, Dak wasn't anything overly impressive this week, but our defense, once again, couldn't stop a fucking nosebleed.
Yeah.
And our offense was even worse. So, yeah, I've got shit to say about that.
I was going to say, we have plenty of time to talk about that. Guys, it's week 14. You guys are already active in the chat. I'm going to go ahead and get our boy Joe Ortiz up here. Still need that win for seeding. That's what I love to see.
Got a few of those too.
We implemented in my home league that I've been in for 17 years now. We implemented a lottery for the draft pick that's all based on wins during the season, beating teams that eventually made the playoffs. It made every game in week 14 matter for some reason, some way, shape, or form. Someone was going to get an extra ball in the lottery. I'm going to use a 100-yard rush, and we're just going to use luck. But someone's going to get an extra ball in the lottery, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that league here in just a second. There's a conundrum I'm dealing with. Joel Worth, welcome, buddy. How are you, buddy? Hope everything's going well. One of our writers there at Club Fantasy, our resident Packers fan who likes to give us shit when we give Aaron Jones shit. So we'll be talking about
too, as always.
Yeah, we'll be talking about your team at the end of the show. Josh, I wanted to get the show started with us personally on fantasy. I like accountability, and the numbers I'm about to throw out aren't at all why I wanted to talk about this, but I like accountability, and I think people should get to know their fantasy analyst.
So, at the end of the day, this is what we live by. We literally do a series of shows in January. It's all about accountability. So I love that you brought this up after reading it this morning. So
I wanted to start the show with us talking about our own fantasy leagues. I am in 17 leagues, Josh, and I am making the playoffs in 15 of those leagues. And if you know me well enough, you know that's not a humble brag. That is just an actual fucking brag. 15 to 17 in the playoffs. One of my loss is a tanking dynasty where I don't even own my own first round pick. Josh knows all about that league because he caught me at my worst possible time and got Travis Kelce off of me. But anyway, I am already eliminated in the Scott Fish Bowl playoffs. And I'm also top 4 in my in my only guillotine league this season. So I am going to make the top 4 in guillotine. But Josh, pretty happy with 15 out of 17 in the playoffs. How are you doing?
So much better in Dynasty than redraft, let me tell you.
I have noticed, Josh, we play in so many Dynasty leagues together. Yeah. You are having a great year in Dynasty. I have no problem saying that. Your plans have clearly culminated in an exciting 2023.
Yeah, so I'll lead off with Dynasty. So I'm in 8 Dynasty leagues. One of those is rebuilding. So out of those 7 that should be competing, I have all but locked up a playoff spot in 6 of them. One of them is going to come down to the wire. That team is stacked. It has Justin Herbert. It has Travis Etienne, Josh Jacobs, Ramondre Stevenson, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, DJ Moore, Deontay Johnson, Dallas Goedert. Jesus. Look at all those names that I mentioned, and then remember how many of them have gotten hurt this year,
I was just
let alone just this week.
I was literally going to say, of all those guys you mentioned, I think only one of them has a healthy right arm.
I'm like, it's baffling to me how good a team can be on paper and just like completely shit the bed. So I may end up sneaking into the playoffs as a 6 seed just based on points. But in that league this year, it's with one of our writers. Chris Molina is the commissioner. Drew Metcalf, another one of our writers, is in that league as well. I'm kind of fighting with them for that final spot. So we implemented a league median in that league this year. I was 13-13 heading into this week. Both Chris and Drew were 11-15. They got both the median and their wins this week. I did not get either, as it turns out.
So you're all going to be tied.
So we're all going to be tied, and it's going to come down to points. And I think I have the points, so I'll sneak in as the 6 seed.
Okay.
But it's been a rough going. And then, of course, the one that I'm rebuilding, I still end up making the damn playoffs because
incredible.
Every single team behind me decides to win, or excuse me, decides to lose. So I can't even get my personal first-round pick in the bottom 4. Because
I was going to ask if you have your own one there. So
I do have, but I also have 3 other first-round picks. One of them is one of those losing teams.
Okay.
So at worst, I will have the 102, or excuse me, at best, I'll have the 102, as well as potentially the 105, which would be my first-round pick. And the other 2 firsts that I have are like the top 2 teams in the league.
Let's be clear here. You're in the playoffs now. Your goal is to make that the 110, homie, or the 112, whatever it is.
Dude, my team is not set up. I literally have one quarterback. It's CJ Stroud, and he's got a concussion.
Yeah, it's because you have 0 quarterbacks. All right, guys. We're going to get into some actual fantasy stuff, but there is one dilemma I'm going through that the fantasy world. I would love your opinions on this, and I have some comments I'm going to bring up as well. But Josh, so my home league, as I mentioned, 17 years. It's a 14-person league. When the NFL changed from a from a 17 to an 18-week schedule, we changed from a 13 to a 14 to make sure there were no buys in the playoffs. Well, being a 14-team league, we had always just played everybody once. It was the easiest schedule in the world. Well, what we decided, I've been able to create like a rivalry system, and sometimes the rivalry stay the same from year to year, but week 1 and week 14, you play your rival. Well, the way everything shook out this week, we have 5, 6 and 7 teams tied for the last spot. 2 of them played each other. Every other one of them played a playoff team. So it was like you're fighting for your life to get into this. The guy who had the most total points is going to lose. In fact, every 6 and 7 team that wasn't in a 6 and 7 game is going to lose. So the 2 6 and 7 teams facing each other, one guy super active, day 1 in this league, has never won the championship, 17 years, but he's been in the league, is facing a guy, Josh, who started ghosting us in week 10, has not set a lineup since week 10, but has won 4 of 5 games without setting a lineup, including this week, and is now going to make the playoffs. So the league was decided, we want to get rid of this guy. What if he wins the championship, Josh? What do I do in this situation? Like, what the fuck? And then more importantly, fantasy karma. Does he, even if he comes back to the table, does he not screw himself by setting a lineup at this point?
Just I know, right?
That shit right. Because he's beating the league average score most weeks. And again, he's won 4 of 5. But my biggest concern here is he's going to play me next week. So God forbid I lose to this guy. But if
this
I
is
don't,
why you should not be in charge of making this decision, because then you're giving yourself bad karma.
Well, we have, believe it or not, my very small podcast that I do for my league has acquired a random fan who started watching us 2 years ago and had tunes in every show begging to be in our league in Australia.
Nice.
Insane.
Give him the spot.
We had him on the show and he wants the spot, and the league wants me to give it to him right now while we're in the playoffs.
Do it. See, you have somebody to give the spot to. They want to take that team. I would do it 100%. 100% I would do it. If he's flat out ghosted you, like has not returned any calls, text, anything, that's kind of what you have to do.
Yeah. So it's an interesting.
At least it's not turning into like a season of the coin, right? Like,
yeah, exactly.
From the league.
Yeah, it is not that at all. But yeah,
I think that's awesome. You picked up a random follower.
Yeah. We even asked him like initially, how did you find us?
We have 691 what feels like random subscribers too, which I love each and every one of you, but still.
So the first season we did this, we would have randos jump into the chat and I would be like, just so you guys are aware, this is very much about a very specific league. We are going to talk about people you don't know. We are going to talk fantasy.
You know?
Yeah. And so like I do it with our buddy Dan, who has done a couple of our shows. So we have a pretty good time with it. So guys, let's get into some real fantasy. That's just a dilemma. Throw your opinions in there. Let's go ahead and get some of these comments up on the screen. So Caesar, Monday Miracle needs 7.3 from Waddle to sneak into the playoffs. I feel really good about 7.3 from Waddle.
You should be able to get 3 for 43 out
Tennessee.
of this one. Let's be honest.
Our buddy Elixir's given us that summary. Elixirs gets the win if Tyreek is under 15 points. Now, if I remember correctly, Elixirs, you're not making the playoffs. I'm sure that's in here. Oh, as of right now, neither team is going to make the playoffs. But you did show that Dad needs 2 out of 3 of first, second, and third to win for him to get into the playoffs, but none of them are winning. How heartbreaking that the 3 teams at the top of your standings can't take care of business and get Dad into the playoffs.
That was me in my home league. I needed to beat my opponent for one of the, I think she's the 7 seed, or no, she's currently the 6 seed. Happens to be my ex-girlfriend, but she needed to get a win this week to advance. Doesn't look like she's going to get that. But if I had beat my opponent, she would have been able to get in as the 6 seed. I ended up losing by like 3.5 points.
Wow. As if she didn't hate you enough. I'm joking.
I know, right?
Completely joking. All right. Now we dive into the actual show sheet. Let's talk some Week 14 scores so far, going all the way back to Thursday night. It wasn't the shit show we thought it would be. Patriots 21, Steelers 18, Bailey Zappi handling business. Jets, as Josh alluded to, hurt CJ Stroud and hurt the Texans' playoff chances, win the game 30-6 in rainy New York. The Ravens-Rams we're going to talk about a little bit later. What a game. 37-31. Ravens take it down and kind of put themselves in a good position for the AFC North. Saints handle business against the Panthers 28-6. Bengals beat the hell out of the Colts 34-14 after being down 14-0. Made Gardner Minshew look very much like Gardner Minshew.
Jake Browning, dude. Whew.
I throw my hands up in the air. Shout out to Joe Zolo, Joe Ortiz in the chat. Joe Zolo, who spent all of Wednesday waxing poetic about Jake Browning. Clearly worked out really well. Buccaneers 29-25 to make the NFC South just even more of a clusterfuck at this point. Browns 31-27. Shout out Joe Flacco, 40 years old, handling business. Bears. Josh, you're going to talk a little bit about this one later. 28, Lions 13. Lions just lining all over the place. 49ers did what they were supposed to do against Drew Lock of all people, 28-16 over
that game was competitive in the first half. I was like, okay, maybe this is that letdown game.
Hilariously, CMC breaks off 72 and then goes into halftime at 98 or something like that. Like your first run got all of your yards.
Yeah,
the Vikings, who are now a team that apparently doesn't allow touchdowns to be scored in their games, 3-0 over the Raiders. What an ugly game.
That was awful.
Yeah. 24-7, the Broncos over the Chargers, which was a little bit of a shock for me. Depending on how you feel about NFL refs this morning, will tell me whether or not you're a Chiefs fan. Bills 20, Chiefs 17 on some craziness at the end of the game. And you know what, Josh? I'll let you just go ahead and talk about the final game of the day. It was a pretty entertaining game. 33 for the Cowboys, 13 for the Eagles. Josh, it's up with the Birds. We'll talk about injuries later. Go into it, my friend.
I mean, this is just like, I'm so tired of this team right now. Like, everybody's sitting here like, you know, we were the worst 10-1 team. You guys are a fraud. You've lost 2 in a row. Let's be real here. We lost 2 in a row to 2 of arguably the best teams in football, coming off of a stretch of games where we faced the Cowboys twice, the Chiefs, the Bills, and the 49ers. Nobody will face a 5-game stretch that difficult in the NFL. And we faced the 49ers and the Cowboys both who had 10 days of rest heading into the game with us. I'm not somebody to make excuses, but if anybody can show me a time when a team like ours right now faced that level of competition on that much rest and did not win those games or won those games, we let's talk. But fact of the matter is we can't stop. Like, we're consistently turning the football over. We're not making stops on defense. And right now our offense is dog shit. Jalen Hurts, AJ Brown, Devonta Smith, they are all trying to do too much, and that is forcing them to lose focus. Hence the 3 fumbles in Dallas territory. That is the problem. Our play calling is mundane. It is JV football right now. When you look at, let's box score scout for a second. Okay? Outside of the fake punt, outside of the fake punt, how many Eagles players had a target in this game?
Well, I was going to bring up, Josh, not a single running back target, which is befuddling to me with DeAndre Swift. So I'm going to throw a guess. I didn't look at this. I just noticed the running back thing. I'm going to guess 4 players had a target.
3. And it is the 3. It is the exact 3 that are the top 3 in the target distribution, right? It's
Smith,
AJ Brown,
and
Devonta Smith, it's Dallas Goedert. If your offense has 3 people as the first 3 read on every single play, are you not salivating if you're a defensive coordinator? Because you know exactly where the ball is going. They're throwing no wrinkles in their offense. They run a league low percentage of pre-snap motion on offense. There is no guessing work. Their routes take way too long to develop, which is putting the offensive line in a bind because they have to then hold protection for longer than the standard 2.5, 3 seconds. And our offensive line is really good. But the longer these plays take to develop, it makes our really good offensive line look not as good as a result. And that's the problem. Brian Johnson is in over his head as a play caller. Like, I understand he's got a great relationship with Jalen. Jalen swears by him. Does not fucking matter if you can't design a playbook. Sorry.
No, you're not wrong.
You have one of the most dynamic running backs in the NFL in DeAndre Swift, who coming into this season with a new team has averaged close to 5 targets per game and has been really damn effective when getting those targets. I think he's seen all of like 1 target in the past 2 games.
Yeah, it's been rough.
He barely handed the ball last week, and this week against Dallas had only 11 carries.
And let's be clear, most of that came in the second half when the game was
basically out of hand.
Reach. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, you're not using him when the game matters.
This offense is predictable. They are predictable. Defenses will straight up swallow you up. I got a little excited when Fletcher Cox had the strip sack on Dak and Jalen Carter returned it for 42 yards. I'm like, hey, are the tides changing? Nope. Offense couldn't get anything going. Nothing. Like, I'm lost for words at this point. Like, I don't know what else I can say to describe this team. Like, we have a great 4-game stretch coming where there are very winnable games. Despite how down Seattle has been, it's in Seattle, and I don't believe we've beat the Seahawks since 2008. So we're going on about 15 years of matchups.
Interesting you bring that up, though. I think it's the exact same length of time that it's been since the Seahawks have lost 3 games in a row under Pete Carroll. I think I heard that last night. So.
Well, there you go. So Monday night will be really interesting.
Yeah, that's crazy.
But yeah, like I can't. And then you have the Giants, Arizona, and the Giants again. We went 3-0 against the Giants last year. The way that the Giants are playing right now, there's no reason we shouldn't beat this team. But the way that Tommy DeVito is playing, I wouldn't be shocked if the Giants steal a game against Philly to close out this season. I really would not. But out of all 4 NFC contenders, and I'll include the Lions in this, we have the easiest road.
Yes.
To getting the 1 seed. Dallas is coming up on their toughest stretch because they still have games against Buffalo and Miami. San Francisco still has to play Baltimore, but they also get Arizona and the Rams, which should be very winnable games for them. So, and they play Detroit, if I'm not mistaken. So, like, these are like a game. Again, these are games that we should win. And if we win all 4 of those games, we can still end up with the 1 seed. But again, I don't trust this team to do that right now.
I think it's fair as we just continue our streak of pissing Joel off.
Look, you can. Here's the thing. I don't know if you're getting on me because I included the Lions in this. I was just taking the top 4 teams with a record, but there's a very much when teams get hot, they tend to stay hot. I'll give your Packers credit, and I've been giving them credit. They've been playing very well. They're red hot right now. If they can get Aaron Jones going once, he's healthy, so to speak, yeah, let's see it. They should very much win this game against the Giants tonight.
Actually, you brought up the Aaron Jones injury thing. That's a perfect segue into the unnecessary shot of Rumpelmints. These are the folks where you're waking up in pain, plain and simple. And these are the injuries. But I wanted to start with Aaron Jones, unlikely to play tonight. Christian Watson already out. So for those like me who had to desperation start Aaron Jones, hopefully you saved one of the other Monday night games to get someone else in the lineup because Aaron Jones unlikely to play tonight. CJ Stroud left the game with a concussion. Nico Collins left the game early with a calf injury. I know that affected some teams' playoff hopes. Geno Smith rolled out before the game with a groin injury. Drew Lock starts the game. And I wonder, do they not ride Drew Lock a little bit longer just to see how things go? Justin Jefferson leaves this game after a big hit, chest injury. Justin Herbert fractured right index finger, left the game. And Josh Jacobs leaves the game with a knee injury, though I was reading up on Josh Jacobs quite a bit. And it sounds like he is not like done or anything like that. There's optimism he can play even this upcoming week. So those are the injuries, but more importantly, let's go ahead and make sure Joel points out in the chat, there's no way they were ever going to put Aaron Jones out on the field. But again, he was listed as questionable, did a couple of limited practices this week. I just thought that maybe he would do something. We're going to get into it with the shot of espresso. These are the quality performances that got the juices flowing. Josh, go ahead and get us started. We have a few things that we need to debate today.
Yeah, so as you can see, DJ Moore here on the cover. That means it's a DJ Moore talking show. Look, wide receiver 3 on the week, 26.8 fantasy points. Solid receiving day, 10 targets, 6 catches, 68 yards, a touchdown. More importantly, 3 carries, 20 rushing yards, and a touchdown.
This man is rushing touchdown of his career, which
is surprising considering how often the Panthers have used him on like end arounds and jet sweeps and things of that nature. DJ Moore is putting the Bears on his back right now.
100%.
Like this offense is literally nothing without him. And I will include Justin Fields in that sentiment. But I will say the Bears defense has played a lot better since they acquired Montez Sweat. Right. And it's shown. Not necessarily because they're getting after the quarterback better, but the back end of their defense operates so much better when they're able to generate pressure. Wow, what a concept.
Let's not forget, they were the first of the Minnesota let's not score touchdown games. So, like, they held Minnesota scoreless. So.
Yeah, and some of those defensive free agency signings, TJ Edwards being the big one, they got him at a bargain. And let me tell you, we in Philly miss him right now because our linebacking core is dog shit. Hopefully, Shaq Leonard shows up in a big way down the stretch. I knew they were only going to play him. Hey, okay. I can't tell if that's sarcasm or not, Joel.
No, I think having worked with Joel as long as we have, I think this is Joel giving a legit compliment to the Bears defense playing well.
Yeah, they've played better. But then herein lies the problem. With the way that this team has played down the stretch, and really for the better part of this year and last year, if and when Matt Eberflus gets fired at the end of the year, they now end up having to implement a brand new coaching scheme on defense.
Yep.
So does this momentum then carry over with a new coaching staff?
And do these pieces that they've went out and acquired fit the next coaching staff and all that kind of thing?
Correct. And they're ultimately going to end up with the number 1 overall pick. I do not see any scenario right now where the Carolina Panthers win a game the rest of this season. Bryce Young, as I talked about with Brian Johnson, I love Bryce Young. I think he's a great player. I think he can have a good and productive career in the NFL. He looks in over his head. 100%. And I don't even know that it's 100% on him. I think the coaching staff that they brought in that was supposed to be great, awful. And they fired all of them, or most of them anyway. And now you're dealing with no pieces around him.
And the offensive line. I want to go back to, I was covering the Panthers in the preseason. There were concerns after the very first preseason game. And then they noted it like 5 times during the game yesterday. He has happy feet in clean pockets. He has happy feet. There was a segment yesterday where he had Jonathan Mingo on 2 deep balls back to back, floated both of them because his feet were not planted and he was not making throws. He was tip tapping because he feels like he's going to get murdered on every play. And we've referenced it how many times this show, Josh? David Carr. A bad season like this can ruin a quarterback. They have got to figure this shit out. But we've also seen Joe Burrow rebound from something like this. So
it's very possible. It's just it takes a quality GM and it takes a quality head coach. The problem is those are 2 very few and far between things to find.
Yeah, certainly not a quality owner in Carolina.
Yeah,
so no.
And that's the other problem. Owners, stop fucking meddling.
Yeah, we're not all Jerry.
You do not have experience playing football. Leave it to the people that do. Please.
There could be one Jerry Jones. And I'm not saying it's a good thing or a bad thing. I'm not commenting on Jerry Jones.
What the fuck have the Cowboys done in 25 years?
Precisely. I'm not saying it's a good thing or a bad thing. I'm just saying we don't need 32 of them.
Facts. Definitely
but Josh,
not wrong there. But the point that I'm getting at is the Bears, they will likely end up with the first overall pick, which is going to leave things in question for one Justin Fields. Because you do not, as a team and franchise, you do not pass on Caleb Williams. I don't care if Justin Fields somehow finds a way to win the next 4 games. You do not pass on Caleb Williams.
And so that was the only thought I could think with the Bears, because one of the things that struck me is when DJ Moore ran that touchdown in, he didn't have a catch in the game yet. And so I'm like, what are we going to do with Justin Fields? Obviously, as a fantasy standpoint, he's great. And a lot of people are going to box score watch this game. And he was the QB3, I believe, this week to go along with the great week from DJ Moore. But when you look at just the kid's numbers, Josh, is he improving? Because it's easy to say, higher completion percentage by, I believe, 3%. Higher QBR by, I believe, 4%. However, when you look at the touchdowns he's generating, last year he generated 1.6 with his immense talent running the ball. This year it has stayed exactly the same despite adding DJ Moore and having a hell of a season out of DJ Moore. He's also doing the exact same yards per attempt. And overall, I don't know that I've seen enough from him to be able to, as you've already said, pass on Caleb Williams. Because one of the things I saw yesterday was someone did a mock draft of the Bears trading out of the 1 to let Williams go to New England. Obviously not going to happen. And then the Bears taking Marvin Harrison at 2. Being from Northeast Ohio and having my newsfeed full of Northeast Ohio, I don't know if this is national news yet. Marvin Harrison's NIL deals are approaching $20 million for 2024. And he commented after the game how badly he wants another shot at Michigan. Do not bank on Marvin Harrison entering the NFL next year is all I'm going to say.
I don't know. I get that from a money perspective. His dad was an NFL superstar.
So he never needed money.
Exactly. He never needed money. Money is not the motivation for him one way or the other. But we have seen so many times, I'll take Matt Leinart, for instance. Matt Leinart at USC, if he had come out his junior year, he would have been probably the number 1 top 3 pick, right? He ends up coming back for his senior year, to chase the championship or whatever,
take ballet.
Blah, blah, blah. And you know what? He ended up in a worse situation as a result because his draft stock ended up dipping because the team the next year wasn't as good.
Yeah.
Players in college, you're I'm all about the student athlete. Go to college and get your education, right? These guys are going to get their education one way or the other. They can go back when you're in school or when you're playing, take summer classes. You can do all that stuff. You can get that. It's not every year you have an opportunity to be a top 2 or top 3 pick in the NFL. Okay? Because what happens if Marvin Harrison comes back and blows out a knee in the very first game or even in training camp?
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden teams are questioning his medicals. And then maybe he slips to 25, which let's be real here. Slipping to 25 might actually be a blessing in disguise because that's a much better team.
Gonna allude to that.
My point being is that there's a level of cachet that comes with being a top 3 pick versus just being a first round pick.
and you guys would all know this better than me, Josh, was JSN projected to fall to 20? Because what you're describing, he didn't blow out his knee, but JSN missed like 9 games last year and fell all the way to 20 in the draft. And you could argue that didn't work out well for him because now he's on a team with questions at quarterback and 2 wide receivers ahead of him. So.
And that's kind of the point. So, like, $20 million is great, whatever. You can still get that in endorsements in the NFL after you sign on the dotted line and you're making $8 million just in base salary for your first year, right?
I mean, let's be clear, it's endorsements right now. Like maybe some of those businesses
that's
still
what the NIL is. It's endorsements.
Exactly. So, and then before we move on, Josh, you have a few other points you wanted to make. This is not the I almost clicked the wrong comment to get up there. Fields to Atlanta. How do we feel about something like that?
I have literally been saying this.
Yeah.
This is the most logical destination for Justin Fields because the Falcons are a team that is in desperate need of a quarterback. They have weapons in place. I don't know if Arthur Smith is going to be the head coach next year. We can all hope and pray that he's not. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to get a better option at quarterback, but let's work under the scenario that Arthur Smith is the head coach in Atlanta next year. Run the boots.
Yep.
Put Justin Fields on the run. You have Kyle Pitts. You have Drake London. You have Bijan Robinson. All 3 of those weapons are better than anything that Justin Fields has ever had in Chicago. And I will throw DJ Moore into that mix.
London versus DJ Moore is mildly interesting, but yes,
they're very different players.
I'll concede the point.
Players.
Yeah.
Okay. They're very different players. One is more of a 50-50 ball jumper. The other is a yak guy.
I do want to throw out, Josh, Arthur Smith got his job on the legs of Ryan Tannehill. He had 7 rushing touchdowns.
That's the point I'm getting at.
Yeah.
He needs a mobile quarterback. They were winning ball games last year in the early part of the season with Marcus Mariota averaging 8+ yards or 8+ carries per game.
Had 5 rushing touchdowns in the first 6 games, if I remember correctly. He was like leading the NFL for a point. So
exactly. Fields is a perfect fit in this current stable of Atlanta. And let's be real here. If Chicago ends up with the first overall pick, which I think is a very high likelihood of happening, the value for Justin Fields will automatically tank. So Atlanta can get Fields for a lot cheaper than, a late first, high second, multiple seconds, etc. I think it's a perfect destination.
Perfect. Josh, you had a couple of, you have another player you want to talk about and some honorable mentions, so go in.
Yeah, Lamar Jackson, again, we kind of hinted at the Baltimore Rams game. This was hands down the most exciting game of the weekend. I mean, 70 rushing yards from Jackson, 316 passing, 3 touchdowns, the 1 INT, 6-point passing per touchdown, scoring 37.64 fantasy points, the overall QB1 on the week. He is showing why he wanted that fully guaranteed contract. There is everything right with Lamar Jackson when he is healthy. This Baltimore Ravens team is difficult to play against when he is healthy because he can literally do it all. Yeah. And he's doing it. And he's doing it without his number 1 tight end right now. Isaiah Likely came out, balled out. Kudos, Ryan, stream of the week.
Thank you.
About time you got something right.
Exactly. Especially at tight end, man. Isaiah Likely scored more points this week than all 5 of my picks scored last week combined.
Hey, there you go. That's perfect. But yeah, Lamar, absolutely fantastic game. He's got all of his weapons involved. We saw the big touchdown catch by OBJ. Zay Flowers coming up big, and of course winning it with the punt return touchdown. Tylan Wallace, shout out Linda and OK State.
No shit.
There you go.
A long time coming for Tylan Wallace, baby.
Yeah, you're not kidding. That man's been buried behind some wide receivers. And then lastly, my honorable mentions. I want to give a shout out, Zach Wilson. The Jets won a game. Zach Wilson didn't have a turnover. And there's a huge cloud over America right now that is causing weather abnormalities everywhere. Coincidence? Just throwing it out there.
The perfect storm.
Hell is freezing over, people.
Where is Mark Wahlberg?
And then Zeke, RB1 on the week. Let's go. Always been one of my favorite running backs, even though he played for Dallas. Huge fan of his in college. Loved watching him. And this is just kind of vindication for everybody that wrote off Zeke, because let's be real here. Zeke scored more in week 14 than Tony Pollard has scored in any week of the 2023 NFL season.
You made a comment.
So all you Tony Pollard stands out there, kiss my ass.
You made a comment last week that stuck with me, Josh. You said, has Zeke's legs ever been this fresh in December? And it's certainly starting to look like you're very right about that. So, all right, we got some comments we have to get to. First, I know this is, if I remember correctly, a friend, the Bucks fan.
Oh, Zach.
Fly Eagles fly. And Craig, who I feel like I've seen you in the comments a few times before. 2 weeks in a row, not good for the Eagles. Josh addressed this earlier in the show. He did say, look at the schedule and the amount of days they've had to plan for games. Take a look at that.
It's not easy, but you know what? At the end of the day, there are no excuses. We've come out flat. Hopefully we get it right.
Yep. Way back in the show, Joe Ortiz did not like that I likened him to Joe Zolo because his takes are better.
Look, the Joe Ortiz is Joe Zolo's burner account is just going to be a running joke on all Club Fantasy shows from here on out. So, Joe, I apologize. And then Joe, sorry, not sorry.
Yeah. You figure out which one we're talking about. But his Monday miracle, he needs Love to have a great game and Tyreek Hill to be bad to win. Let me throw this out there. If Jordan Love goes off, I do lose in my home league, but it also knocks that guy I was talking about out of the playoffs and gets my rival into the playoffs, and we'll be facing each other again next week. So even though as a commissioner for the integrity of the league, that's what I should be rooting for, I hope Love has the worst fucking game ever because I do not want my buddy Dan Metzger to make the playoffs. I'd rather have the guy who doesn't set a lineup in. That's just me being vindictive. However, while I do think Jordan Love can have a good game, I don't know if we're going to see a bad Tyreek game against Tennessee, Josh.
No, absolutely not.
Yeah.
It's going to be a big first half where he comes out with like 7 catches, 150 yards, at least 1 touchdown. And then it's probably pretty quiet the rest of the way while they give Mostert and Achane a chance to just kind of do the things that they do. And then they'll sprinkle in Jalen Waddle. That seems to be their recipe against really bad teams.
Speaking of which, Josh, it's not a tall ask, but our buddy Jim Lord Israel needs 2 points to make the fantasy playoffs. And we're going to choose between Derrick Henry and Devon Achane. Josh, 2 points, fantasy playoff berth on the line. Which back are you putting out there?
This is so interesting to me because this is basically a floor versus ceiling play, right?
100%.
Because I literally just laid out how Achane is going to score his fantasy
100%.
All going to be in the second half, right? The Titans do not stand a chance unless Derrick Henry gets going. But the way that Miami's defense has played lately, they're going to get so far out in front so quickly, the offense will, that the defense can just kind of sit back. And as a result, Tennessee's not going to use Derrick Henry the same way that they use him. And they're going to be subbing in Tajay Spears. This could literally be an instance where Derrick Henry gets like 6 carries and maybe 11 yards, 19 yards at most, right? I can 1,000% see that.
You're not wrong.
I really can. I'm going to go Achane and just take the upside all day, every day. He showed last week. He's healthy. So I don't think there's going to be an issue of him touching the ball and then immediately leaving because he tweaked the knee or something like that. Just ride with Achane because I think that's both the safe play and the upside play.
Achane's passing upside speaks to that as well, whereas Tajay Spears is going to take it away from Henry. I would also go Devon Achane in this matchup. And then, Josh, I wanted to throw a little shade your way and most of fantasy football's way. Brandon Aubrey was just a delight to watch last night, an absolute delight. And I feel like people who have kicked fantasy kickers out of their league, there is something you're missing out on, and you cannot convince me. I know you are. You cannot convince me otherwise. Aubrey dropped 22 points in my one league last week. And so what I'm going to throw out there for some people is if you do want to get rid of kickers or at least make kickers more interesting, take away points for missed field goals and missed extra points and make longer field goals worth more points, and kickers get a lot more fun and a lot more interesting. Brandon Aubrey knocking down an unnecessary 50-yard field goal, Josh, against your Eagles with 1 minute, 30 seconds left in the game, probably sealed my buddy's fate and knocked him out of the playoffs on the back of a kicker. And I love shit like that.
So I will say, in the leagues that I still use kickers, the way that I do the scoring, I still give them negative points. But the negative points are higher for chip shot field goals.
100%.
Okay. So when PATs were easy, they only missed 1 point. But now they're 33-yard field goals. So if you miss a PAT, you're losing 3 points straight up. If you can't make a chip shot field goal, you should not be rewarded for that, plain and simple.
Yep.
But if you're making bomb-ass kicks like 50-plus yarders on the regular, you're going to get 5 points for those kicks. That's how I've kind of adopted in the leagues that I still play kicker, because again, it will value the really good kickers. So it does make streaming kickers a little more difficult.
Yeah, I had been riding Aubrey. I got an inkling at the beginning of the season this kid was legit. Rode him for the first 6 weeks, cut him on the bye because I don't hold kickers through the bye, and my league let me get him back in week 8, and I have been riding him ever since, and he ended my buddy's season last night. So shout out to kickers as we move on to morning mimosas. This is the tingly feeling that something great is on the horizon. And Josh, I'm going to start with an easy one. You kind of already talked about Lamar Jackson, and guess what? We're going to talk about the Ravens again a little bit later on, but I wanted to go ahead and throw Odell Beckham some love because he was the first name we did. I think it was a show where Josh, me, and Joe all did a show together. And this was the name I threw out that I thought was going to benefit most from the Mark Andrews injury. And obviously, Zay Flowers has had a couple of good weeks, especially touchdown scoring. Isaiah likely came out this week. But if you watch this game in the first half, Zay Flowers could not get open, which is something I'm going to talk about later. Odell Beckham was the offense, and he looked a little shades of 5 years ago, Odell Beckham. He was making adjustments in the air. He was making tough catches. He was the guy Lamar needed him to be. Finished this game with 10 targets, only caught 4 of them, but they were a nice 4. 97 yards and a touchdown with a 46-yard catch. Odell Beckham, I think, is going to be a guy who you are going to be able to plug as a wide receiver 2 every week for the rest of the season, as long as Baltimore is needing to throw the football and needing to win games. And the way that the AFC North looks like right now, Baltimore's going to need to keep winning games. I love me some Odell Beckham, and I think it's going to be a nice end of the season for OBJ.
Yeah, I don't hate it. I mean, the way that this offense is structured, they're spreading the football around. Like, it's not like hyper targeting one player. You know, even when Mark Andrews was healthy, very rarely did you have 14 targets and then 4 targets, right? Like,
exactly.
You had some of those games, like Zay Flowers did have a couple of those games, especially early on. But it really is like it's 5 here, it's 6 here, maybe 7, 3, it's 2. Like, they're kind of spreading the football around. Nelson Aguilar got involved yesterday. Rashad Bateman has had a couple spike weeks here and there. It hasn't, produced a ton of fantasy points, but Lamar is just letting the defense tell him where he needs to go with the football. And that's the maturation of Lamar Jackson
100%.
In this Todd Monken offense. It's been a lot of fun to watch. And, like you said, OBJ he's one of the all-time highlight reel wide receivers. So anytime we get quality OBJ, sign me the fuck up.
Better for the NFL.
100%. 100%.
Josh, who did you like what you saw yesterday?
I'm going to hit on Chase Brown. We talked about him a lot kind of in, rookie season with our running back previews, especially after he landed in Cincinnati with the Bengals. Everybody was writing off Joe Mixon.
It was when that contract thing was happening. So
exactly. So, we weren't 100% sure. Were they going to bring Joe Mixon back? Is Chase Brown going to be like the next man up? Obviously, Joe Mixon ended up restructuring the deal. He's still there. Plenty of run this season. Still the same inefficient Joe Mixon. Let's not sugarcoat that.
100%.
But Chase Brown has kind of dealt with some injuries. We got a lot of Travion Williams early in the season. But the last 2 weeks, this kid has looked electric with the football in his hands. Very quick. So you're really starting to see that burst that a lot of people, when they scouted Illinois, saw. And I'm loving it. 3 catches, 80 yards, and a touchdown on the receiving front. Again, not the most efficient on the ground. I think he was 8 for 25, a little over 3 yards per carry. But hey, you know what? That's about what Joe Mixon's doing. So he fits right in.
I'd say he's doing what the offensive line is letting the running backs do.
Basically, yeah. So, but anytime you have younger, inexperienced quarterbacks playing the way that Cincinnati does right now with Jake Browning, they're going to look for a lot of safety valves underneath routes, right? That's kind of where running backs live. And if Chase Brown is going to see these types of targets, you might be getting a league-winning RB2 in the next 3 weeks. I'm just saying.
Yeah, it was certainly fun to watch. There were a lot of highlights from that game, especially after the Bengals went down. Chase Brown was the spark plug that kept them alive in that game with that receiving touchdown. So
100%. Loved it. And then finally, I know the Jets have had a very tough season.
What a pro Jet show we're running all of a sudden.
Look, I kind of wrote them off. Everybody has. Let's be real here. The Texans have been red hot. There was no way that bringing back Zach Wilson was going to be the answer to toppling the Texans. Zach Wilson fucking balled. And you know why? Because he's got two really good freaking weapons in Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson. Straight up. There's a reason that one of them won the Offensive Rookie of the Year in 2022. And then the other one might have won it had he stayed healthy all year.
Yeah.
But here's a fun fact for you that I saw Fantasy Life's Ian Harditz tweet out this morning. Of all running backs receiving numbers in PPR scoring, Breece Hall is currently second in points generated in receiving work. Obviously, Christian McCaffrey being number one.
Yeah.
But you know what? This past week was a telltale sign. He only had 40 yards rushing. 8 for 81, I believe,
and
through the air and a touchdown. And he was the RB2 on the week. Get Breece Hall involved in the passing game, he can do some really dangerous things. And speaking of the passing game, Garrett Wilson, 9 for 108 yards on 14 targets. We all drafted him high because we thought he was going to be the Devontae Adams with, Aaron Rodgers as the quarterback in this offense. He's still the wide receiver 21 on the season, and he's only scored 1 touchdown since week 2.
Yeah.
And he was the wide receiver 5 just this week.
It's just funny because I thought touchdowns were going to be the thing Aaron Rodgers was going to fix, and then Aaron Rodgers is dead, and there's still no touchdowns.
Yeah. So, it is what it is. But look, they need to keep getting these two guys the football. They need to simplify this offense to a point where Zach Wilson just focuses on those two guys because ain't nobody else in that offense helping them right now.
Correct.
Nobody.
Yeah. Rough Jets offense, but we wouldn't call that a head scratcher. Plus, they won this week, but the hangover are our biggest head scratchers of the week. And you guys aren't privy to the no pun intended group chat, but let's just say Jerry Jeudy, not a fan favorite in that chat, Josh.
I mean, okay. Joe has been banging the SMU wide receiver drum for a very long time.
Correct. And I was the enemy of the state last year for defending Jerry Jeudy, but I quickly jumped off of that train as well.
Yeah. And you got on me because, why am I going to bounce off Jerry Jeudy? I should have stuck to my priors. He had more touchdowns this past year, blah, 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 this and that, et cetera, et cetera.
I forgot about that.
Cortland Sutton was still coming back from a knee injury, dude.
Yeah, I did forget about that.
Okay. New head coach comes in. Guess who's the number one receiving option? Oh, wait, it's the better wide receiver.
The SMU wide receiver.
I mean, you cannot sit here and tell me that a really good wide receiver doesn't have good footwork. How do you get on the sideline to make a toe drag saving catch and can't fucking drag your toes? What are we doing, Jerry Jeudy? What are we doing? There is a reason Cortland Sutton has straight up lapped you in this receiving room. Over his past 9 games, Cortland Sutton has 8 touchdowns.
Yeah.
He is a dog.
Yeah. Unstoppable is what Cortland Sutton has been.
Jerry Jeudy, go away. You're not good. Sorry.
Speaking
Waste
of not
of
good.
A first round pick.
Oof. Speaking of not good, Detroit, at least yesterday.
Yeah.
And honestly, kind of since Thanksgiving.
The Lions are becoming kittens again. Like this is what they are. They are a team that is not built for winning. We said this at the beginning of the season that Dan Campbell had all of the pieces necessary to be a dominant team in the NFC and make a playoff run.
100%.
This was going to be the defining season for him, not only as the head coach, but also for the Detroit Lions as a football team, because the pressure is on. The spotlight is on you. The Packers are down. The Vikings basically rebuilding after a 13-3 season. And then, of course, they lose Justin Jefferson. They lose Kirk Cousins. They're in the tank, right? It is the Detroit Lions division to run away with. And now it's closing. They have only a 2-game lead now on those same rebuilding Minnesota Vikings. Yeah. The Packers have been red hot, and if they beat the Giants on Monday night, they're only 2 games back.
As Josh mentioned, while the lead is closing, the sound you hear, according to Joe Wirth, is the NFC North window opening.
There you go. The problem with the Lions, they do not have a winning culture. So they do not know how to react when the spotlight is on them. And that's where good coaching comes in. I'm not going to sit here and say that Dan Campbell is not a good coach, because I think he's a fantastic coach. But he himself, as a head coach, has never been in this position.
Yeah.
You will learn very quickly how you need to react and bounce back to get your team in a position to do the things that they need to do. Because this team is god-awful on the road, and they showed it again in week 14.
So you've kind of alluded to, and I know you have another thing you want to talk about, but I kind of want to jump into mine a little bit, because my bone to pick with the Ravens was, if a lot of that game, Lamar Jackson wanted to throw the ball and nobody was open. Like you saw the breakout plays by Isaiah Likely. But going back to your Detroit point, Amon-Ra St. Brown, 9 targets in this game, only caught 3. Zay Flowers, until the second half, had not done a lot yesterday. I'm getting nervous about some of these wide receiver ones that, and I love the Sun God, adore him. You can't get taken out of a game like this, Josh. And so I think you're hitting a point here where they're going to learn what they need to do. But it became very apparent in yesterday's game, they were certainly not there yet.
No, they're not. It's frustrating because, I want to root for the Lions. I want to show that, you know what, we can actually see these upstart teams get good and make the moves necessary to take that next step. They're just not doing it. They have all the pieces to do it. The back end of their defense has fallen apart. Aiden Hutchinson looked like he was staring at Godzilla and said, "Oh, sorry. You got me, dude. I'm just backing up here." That's literally what he played like last night.
Yep.
It was embarrassing for him because he's been a wrecking ball all season.
Was a wrecking ball on Detroit on Thanksgiving.
Yeah. I just yeah. The Lions still have some work to do.
Yeah. And then public enemy number 1. If you are a rational fan, you are blaming this person. If you're an irrational fan, you're blaming the refs. But Kadarius Toney, Josh, not a very liked man in the NFL right now.
I mean, this is it's regularly scheduled programming with Kadarius Toney. Seriously. It's we tune in to our favorite sitcom, and every single week we watch it, we're just laughing our fucking asses off. Certainly, that is what Kadarius Toney is. He is a running joke in the NFL.
He's certainly a running joke in the Club Fantasy group chat. There is no ifs, ands,
and New York Giants media is having a fucking field day with this.
Yeah.
Fucking field day with this.
They traded Toney for essentially the hurt Darren Waller, if you do all the math on that, and they're probably happier with IR Darren Waller.
Right? It's unreal to me. He was a first round pick because he has talent, right? You can argue the dynasty community, late breakout, this and that, blah, blah, blah. Look, the kid has talent when his head is on straight. But it's hard to scout what's between the ears because you can't physically see it.
Yep.
There's something missing. How do you line up literally over the ball, looking at the ball saying, "Oh yeah, I'm online. Okay, cool." This is Frank Clark in the playoffs all over again.
100%.
And I get Patrick Mahomes being frustrated, but his point literally makes no sense. "Oh, you can't make that call. I've literally never seen an offensive offsides." Dude, are you not paying attention to other people in this league?
Yeah.
We had an offensive offsides call on us on a fucking brotherly shove Sunday night. It gets called when it's obvious. And the sad part was in the Philly game, that was very questionable call. This was blatantly obvious.
Yeah.
Did it affect the game? Yeah, 100% it affected the game. Because your guy's a fucking bonehead and doesn't know how to see in a straight line. That's the problem. The frustrations with the Chiefs offense are boiling over, and Patrick Mahomes is tired of taking the accountability.
No,
because he can only lash out and he can only keep things inside for so long before you boil
that's
over.
what I. Okay,
and he's going to be the leader and not basically yell at his guys and say, "Shape the fuck up." Tom Brady would never had the issue of saying, "Shape the fuck up."
I'm hoping it's happening behind closed doors because Brady would have done it in the media. And not come
Well,
off.
he would have done it on the sideline.
Well, that's true. Absolutely.
I don't know that he would have gone in front of a microphone to do that, but he would have done it on the sideline and definitely in the locker room.
Well, yes and no. I think Brady asked the question that Mahomes was asked would have been like, you can't line up offsides on that play. Like, I think that would have been Brady's answer. Like,
probably.
Like, not completely defending Toney. Not me, certainly not. But Brady wouldn't have defended Toney. Yeah. But again, get the kid off the field. Joe Bryant put out a tweet last night in the middle of the game. How do you not cut Kadarius Toney immediately after the game? Right now, you got to do something. You got to keep the kid off the field. It's not there.
He's hurting you more than he's helping you because let's be real, certainly. He hasn't helped you at all this season.
Yeah. Just to briefly touch on what I was talking about with the Ravens. I didn't feel like the plays broke their way. First of all, what in the hell is happening with Matthew Stafford all of a sudden? Like 10 touchdowns over the last 3 games, but you are coming off of a bye in your home and not great weather, and you just let these guys literally run all over you. Kieran Williams, Cooper Kupp had a great game. Puka Nacua does it again. Matt Stafford handles business. The Ravens defense is mildly concerning for me, but then again, Lamar Jackson forcing himself into being a passer. I watched him cost his team 2 first downs last night where they punted, I believe, on both of them, where he waited so long to be a passer, his running lanes closed, where if he had just taken off, and I'm not one to judge whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, and they won the game in overtime, should have never been an overtime game, but like their defense allowing 31 points would have only had 1 fantasy point if not for their defensive touchdown. Not a great showing for a team that should be controlling their fate in a very winnable of a division. But now you have Jake Browning playing his ass off. You got Joe Flacco playing his ass off. So they're going to have to fight to win a division. It's going to be very easy to look at Lamar Jackson QB1 and be all in. There are some things that need to be addressed by the Baltimore Ravens, and they are my head scratcher, just that they didn't win this game handily, and that was a problem for me, Josh. And again, I'm nitpicking. They balled.
Yeah, I mean, it goes to what I was talking about with the Eagles defense earlier in the season. It was bend, don't break. The last 2 weeks, they've broke. And the Ravens defense, really for the better part of like 5 years, has kind of been along those same lines. It's 100%. Bend, don't break, right? And their next 4 games, now again, they're 2 games up on Cleveland. So they have some wiggle room. And they're 1-1 this year against Cleveland. So ultimately, it's going to boil down to division record and conference record in terms of breaking a tie, right?
Yep.
The Ravens' next 4 games at Jacksonville, at San Francisco, home to Miami, and then you close out with a very winnable game against the Steelers.
Yeah.
There's a good chance they go 2-2 down the stretch. So there goes your 2 games right there if Cleveland wins out, right?
Not to mention the loss to Miami. Final 4. The loss to Miami would be a conference loss, which could come into
correct,
play.
Which that's for the number 1 seed, essentially, because those two teams right now are neck and neck. Cleveland right now, complete opposite when it comes to schedule.
Yeah.
Versus Chicago, at Houston, versus the Jets, at Cincinnati.
And
those are 4 very winnable games.
4 winnable, 3 conference games, which again, if this comes down to conference tiebreaker, Cleveland winning all 3 of those could be very, very interesting.
And right now, both have the same division record and the same conference record.
Yep.
So then it would go to record against common opponents, which I don't see that right now.
But I think Cleveland could take that conference record before this is all said and done. So it's super interesting to see how this all shakes out. Speaking of the Miami defense, great question by Craig here. How do we think Miami D, from a fantasy standpoint, do we think they're one of the best right now? I just re-updated my rankings after game 12. They start off on my base rankings before I take matchups into effect as my defense 5, Josh. And I think it's that their offense constantly puts their defense into winnable positions, especially for fantasy purposes.
Yeah, and I mean, they've now, granted, they end the season with 3 really tough matchups, one of which probably won't matter in week 18. 2 very easy games for them from a fantasy defense perspective. Titans tonight, home to the Jets next week.
Yeah.
They should eat up Zach Wilson, right?
Yep.
But then they're home to Dallas, who their offense has been red hot.
Yep.
They're at Baltimore. We know how good their offense can be.
Yep.
And then again, the final week 18, which it probably wouldn't play for fantasy purposes, they're against Buffalo. So, I mean, it's going to be about a half and half split. I mean, you're going to have some weeks where they're probably a top 5 defense, other weeks where they're barely a top 12 defense.
I'll tell you right now, unless something changes in Dallas, I'm not starting them against Dak Prescott. You're not getting the turnovers you want to see out of that offense. So
I will say it's Dallas on the road. They're not the same team on the road.
That's very fair. And Craig, apparently a Canuck, because he brings up nice to see Canadian players doing well. Brandon Aubrey, I think there's a story to be told with Brandon Aubrey. The guy had never played football, was a soccer player, and pretty incredible stuff there. So,
yeah, they didn't mention that at all last night. About 18 different references to Brandon Aubrey being a soccer player. Like, Jesus Christ, we get it, dude.
As we get to this point in the season, Josh, we're going to take a look back at ADP, and these are our whiffs heading into ADP. This is the 3rd week in a row. So these are some names now we're reaching a little bit, but I still think these are guys that we need to take a look at. Justin Herbert, QB6, he was drafted. He is the QB8, but as someone who has Herbert, especially after last night, you're not happy right now. Miles Sanders is an obvious one, drafted as the RB20, now the RB45. Alexander Mattison drafted as the RB21, now the RB31. Drake London was drafted as the wide receiver 24. He's now the wide receiver 34. Chris Godwin drafted as the 25, now the wide receiver 36. And Chiggy Okonkwo fooled everybody. Tight end 12, he was drafted as. He is the tight end 24. And I cannot explain to you how bad you have to be the tight end 24 in fantasy football. We break these into multiple categories, Josh. We call it Sunday Bloody Mary Sunday. These are the, you can drink all the alcohol you want. This highly drafted player is still going to give you a hangover. Let's talk about Miles Sanders, Josh, because, Philly guy played really well for you guys last year. Didn't quite translate when he moved to Carolina.
Yeah, I think I had him inside my top 20 when I did my projections, or right around that 20 mark. Like, I wasn't expecting any, world beater numbers, but I figured he'd be a pretty consistent RB2 because, let's face it, Carolina Panthers don't have any weapons. They have none. Like, you're relying on a 33-year-old Adam Thielen, a underdeveloped rookie wide receiver in Jonathan Mingo, who, granted, has seen a lot of targets probably for the better part of the last month, hasn't done a whole lot with them. And then Sanders, who has shown the ability to be a versatile running back and catch passes, even if he doesn't catch passes effectively very well. He's basically been benched. Chuba Hubbard's been the starter for the last, month?
Yep.
And has actually been playing pretty well behind a pretty shitty offensive line. Sanders can't get anything going.
Team. Yeah.
Sanders can't get anything going. Yep. Like, I know how much he wanted to stay in Philly. He's a Pennsylvania guy. He went to Penn State, drafted by Philly, ended up came to that team after they won a Super Bowl. And then, of course, they went to the Super Bowl last year, so he didn't get a chance to taste that victory. He wanted to come back. They, of course, they're not going to invest a ton of money in, the running back position because their offense just is running back central, basically. So he ends up going to where he knows people. He knows Frank Reich from Philly. He knows Deuce Staley from Philly. He comes in there, does nothing. Absolutely nothing. I don't want to say he's the reason they got fired, but all of them got fired and he's still there. So
I know.
I would not be surprised one bit if Miles Sanders gets cut after this season due to salary cap savings. It would not surprise me a lot, especially the way that free agent contracts are structured these days. Like, it has been rough going, but you know what? Shout out Chuba Hubbard. He's taken his opportunity and run with it.
Yeah, it's worked really well. He's going to be an interesting one to talk about in Dynasty next year, too, because he's not necessarily old, but he'll also be on his 3rd coaching staff in 2 seasons. So it's certainly not the team that drafted him whatsoever. That's for sure. And then I wanted to talk about Alexander Mattison. It's very clear he's better in a timeshare, but that's still not good. You have to think of this guy as a bust because once Cook left, everybody thought Mattison was going to step up, and I had harped on the inefficiencies that we saw from him. And now that you're seeing Ty Chandler get far more touches in a game, not necessarily more than Mattison, But Mattison has looked better when things are split, but that doesn't work out well for fantasy. Plain and simple. You don't want this guy as the lead back, though at least when he was the lead back, he was getting a ton of passing work, and that was working out. Chandler, if I remember correctly, took all the passing work last night. I don't think Mattison got any of it. And so this is a very weird offense that you probably just don't want a part of anyway until they figure their quarterback situation out. But Mattison is a guy who you cannot continue to throw into your lineup and just pray that things work out. I think we're going to continue to see more and more Ty Chandler as the season moves on. And Josh, we have a little bit of a disagreement here because the next category is about the people that if we buy in now, things might actually work out real well. But you think Chris Godwin is a guy that maybe we shouldn't be firing up as we head into the fantasy playoffs. And I think maybe there's a little redemption there. So go ahead and tell me why I'm wrong.
Yeah, I mean, Chris Godwin, the whole thing with Chris Godwin after finishing as like the wide receiver 2, what feels like eons ago.
God, how long ago was that?
Yeah, exactly. Everybody's like, oh, Chris Godwin to the moon.
How long ago was the 30-30 season?
Yeah, well, and that's the point. It's like he was the leading wide receiver on a team with Bruce Arians and no risk it, no biscuit mentality with Jameis Winston throwing 30 touchdowns and 30 interceptions.
Yeah.
Then, of course, Tom Brady comes in, who has an affinity for slot wide receivers. Yes, and Chris Godwin's running close to 70% of his routes out of the slot and has a pretty damn good season. Well, now he doesn't have Tom Brady, doesn't have Bruce Arians. He comes in is getting fit into a scheme that is very similar to what they've run out of Seattle with DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. So odds are Chris Godwin's going to be the Tyler Lockett role, right? That's where he profiles. He's going to move inside and outside. He's run about 35% of his routes from the slot. Chris Godwin has 1 touchdown on the season that has come from the slot. Rookie Trey Palmer has more touchdowns this season than Chris Godwin. I want to point that out. Okay. Chris Godwin has not been effective when asked to run on the outside. He is a slot wide receiver. So if he's not in an offense that heavily features a slot wide receiver, he's not going to be productive. And we've seen it this year. There are 3 games left. If you miraculously made the playoffs, investing a pretty high pick in Chris Godwin as your wide receiver 2, kudos, because you probably picked up Puka Nacua after your first waiver week.
Yeah. And this goes, Josh, this is the argument we've been having all season long is every wide receiver is good. So how much time can you really waste on bad wide receivers?
Yeah.
I guess where my hope for Chris Godwin is I'm pulling up my final stats here. I guess where my hope for Chris Godwin is the targets have been there. He has only seen fewer than 5 targets once this entire season. Unfortunately, it was 2 weeks ago. So you don't like to see that recency of bad play. But Chris Godwin wasn't bad to start the season, though. Wow, even with his good week. See, this is where it throws you off. I guess I'm okay with his floor. There's certainly no ceiling, which is a point you were hitting. But I looked at his first 8 weeks where he was doing quite well, never scored fewer than 8 fantasy points. He was still the wide receiver 35. Wide receiver is hard this year, man. So
there's been so many good wide receivers, and it goes to the whole debate that we had against Jalen Waddle about a month ago.
It is. And like, I find it funny, Josh, that we have had.
There's no ceiling. None.
I find it funny that we have had this same argument, and I'm always on the wrong side. I don't mind saying this, where Jalen Waddle, Derrick Henry, and now Chris Godwin, where I'm like, just accept them for what they are. I'm clearly an accepting person.
Well, see, and I think, and that's the big issue is that, we fall in love with these names and we know that Chris Godwin has talent, but this is where scheme is so important in the NFL because these offensive coordinators come in and they're not catering their system to the talent that's on the team. They're trying to fit the square pegs that are the players in the round holes that is their scheme. So if you have a player who's really, really effective out of the slot, fucking play him in the slot. It's not rocket science. Cater your scheme to that. But I also know that the problem right now is that outside of Mike Evans, they do not have another viable, capable perimeter wide receiver on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So they're kind of forced to fit Chris Godwin out there.
You can't play a guy in the slot when you don't have a third wide receiver.
But they also don't run a lot of 11 personnel.
They don't at all.
So therein lies your problem.
Yeah. And the other issue that Chris Godwin is facing is, to the chagrin, Josh, of you, or at least earlier in the year, you've come around a little bit. Rashad White has proven himself a capable asset, certainly in the passing game. So,
and that's what I've said. He's very good in the passing game. I questioned how often they would actually throw the football to him. But when you look at his rushing numbers, they've been pretty much exactly what I said they would be. He's not been effective as a runner. Can't run between the tackles. But as a passing down back, he's great. He's a volume play. And he's been a high volume play because right now he's one of like 4 RBs that's actually played in every game this season.
Yeah, it's worked out really, really
well. So it's worked out really well. And the moment that I said, go out and buy Rashad White, you looked at me like I was drunk. It's Monday morning. Come on.
I didn't look at you like you were drunk. I was shocked to hear it because I was not as down on Rashad White as you were.
That's fair.
Josh, there was a situation where I did a draft for you this year, and basically you were like anyone but Rashad White. And so I was like,
that would be the auction league where I'm hanging on by a thread.
There you go.
But you know what? Thanks for CeeDee Lamb. It's been a lot of help.
There you go. So, but you were like anyone but Rashad White. And I was like, okay, that's fair. And so that's to hear you say anything positive about the kid. Getting back to it again, Chris Godwin, Josh is right. He loves when I say that on these Monday shows. The ceiling is not there, but I think the floor is safe enough going into the playoffs. They have a decent schedule heading into the fantasy playoffs, and they're going to have to throw the ball a lot. Josh, someone who we definitely agree on, and I kind of hoped you were going to pick him because I wanted to defend Godwin wrongly, obviously. But a player who looks like they might be on the rebound, the handful of aspirin, I think we can both agree, Drake London.
Dude, Tampa Bay is a sieve on defense. They cannot stop wide receivers at all, and Drake London just said, bet. 10 catches, 172 yards, absolutely phenomenal performance. And this is, again, what we talk about with Drake London. He's really good. He just doesn't have a quarterback that can get him the football consistently.
Yeah.
Now, here's what I will say. When you look at the numbers, the next 3 weeks will not be easy for Drake London.
Certainly not Tampa Bay.
And the problem is these are all really winnable games for Tampa Bay because they're all very questionable teams.
For Atlanta.
At Carolina should be a pretty easy W. But because you can run all over Carolina, wide receivers don't typically do well.
Precisely.
Right? So Bijan Robinson to the fucking moon in week 15. Tyler Algier, great flex play in week 15.
Yeah.
Drake London, man, I can't do another wide receiver 45 performance, man. You're killing me. But that's essentially what it's going to be because
in week 1, he scored 0 points against Carolina.
Exactly. Like they just, and I believe they got JC Horn back, which that strengthens their already, I guess, good secondary. But I would rather say untested secondary because you can run all over them. You don't need to throw all over. But then they play Indy in week 16. Indy's kind of middle of the road pass defense.
Yeah.
So he'll see some opportunities. And then at Chicago in the fantasy championship, also a pretty middle of the road pass defense, although they have played better of late.
But
and
Chicago
Jawan Johnson is playing for that second contract next year.
Yeah.
So there's some opportunity, but also it's kind of like, do I want to trust him? Yeah, maybe. To me, he's still a flex play at minimum, but I'm fine starting him as a wide receiver too, because again, this is the talent that Drake London is.
Yeah.
And all these numbers are going to do is depress his ADP in 2024 when they hopefully get a new quarterback. And oh my God, Drake London to the fucking moon.
He's a value next year, baby. Oh, he's going to be on every. The only leagues where I might not get him are the leagues where I'm in with other club fantasy people because I think he's going to be a very, very popular pick. No, I absolutely love it, and I hope to see some good things out of him, especially in that Colts game. I think there's a lot of potential there. Next week's a conundrum for me with Drake London, Josh, because I have left him on the bench this week in my home league. I will be playing to move on to the playoff. I'll be in the playoffs week 1 next week. Tyler Lockett hasn't been great, so I'm going to be debating Drake London versus Tyler Lockett. But when I look back at a 0 from Drake London, don't get many zeros from Tyler Lockett. So that's going to be my worry there. Guys, we're moving on to the title segment of the show. It is chill the fuck out. This is the dud that was merely a blip on the radar. And actually, Josh, I want to just quickly bring up Craig's comment. What happened to Nico Collins? There was an injury in that game, Craig. Injured his calf, and I believe
it was the first quarter. It was very quick.
First quarter, second drive. So you lose Nico Collins, and then the Texans lose CJ Stroud later on in the game. So it was a rough game for the Texans in general. It is a calf injury, which there are issues of reoccurrence there. So you're going to need to pay attention follow the practice reports there, because obviously Nico Collins is a large reason why you're probably in your fantasy playoffs. It was an injury. So again, chill the fuck out on Nico Collins. Nothing to be worried there. Josh, Gus Bus.
I mean, 6 touches. That's it. This is a guy that's basically made his living on volume and touchdowns.
Has to have it.
Unfortunately, if he doesn't have either one of those, then you're going to be in trouble. He's not involved in the passing game ever. So you're limited there when it comes to PPR. Like, he's basically an RB2 with upside based on touchdowns. So, but we love him in standard because of said touchdowns, right?
Yep.
This was a back and forth game, and it was very fast paced. And if it's very fast paced, they're not going to be running the football a ton. Matthew Stafford was absolutely balling, so Lamar Jackson had to match that. He had 43 pass attempts, Lamar Jackson had. Can you remember a time when Lamar Jackson ever threw the football more than 40 times?
No.
Yeah.
You know how sore that man's shoulder is?
Exactly. This was not a game for running backs at all. They use Keaton Mitchell a little bit more simply because he does have that pass catching upside. And they use Justice Hill in that pass catching role as well. Because when Gus Edwards is on the field, the Ravens offense is pretty simple. It's, hey, we're probably running the football because we're not throwing it to Gus.
Old school football when Gus Edwards is on the field.
Correct. And with Aaron Donald in the middle of that defense, let's be real, you're probably not going to have a great rushing day. So, I mean, you take Lamar Jackson out of the fold, they had 15 carries for 69 yards. It's a pretty average day, especially for a Baltimore Ravens offense that runs the football very well.
I'm actually get Craig up here a little bit. So let's start with, thanks, buddy. We love chilling with you guys too. Monday is a vent show for us. Literally, Josh and I just get on here, bitch about fantasy, bitch about our teams, and help you guys with your Monday miracles. I use Fantasy Pros to get my injury news. It seems to be a very good. Now let me go back. Football Guys has Dr. Adam Hutchinson, who does a lot of injury articles, so he'll have updates for you throughout the week. But for nice little click the note and get the practice report news, Fantasy Pros, if you just go to their rankings and click on the players, you can get some really interesting tidbits there. It's how I do the injury report for our Start Sit show every Saturday. They usually have really up-to-date information there, but Football Guys, Adam Hutchinson, great stuff over there as well. But yeah, we appreciate you tuning up every week. For me, Josh, on the chill the fuck out, it's going to be Josh Jacobs. Had a very rough week this week, but it seems Minnesota is just bringing out the worst of all of their opponents because Chicago beat them without scoring a touchdown. And now they just lose to Las Vegas. Lose to Las Vegas. Minnesota wins against Las Vegas, holding Las Vegas also without a touchdown. Yeah, I forgot what team I had up when I'm looking at my notes here. Vegas doesn't score a touchdown. Minnesota seems to be playing very good defense and just bringing out the worst in their opponents. However, after Jacobs went down, and he did go down in the fourth quarter, but after Jacobs went down, they only ran the ball 3 times. Amir Abdullah and Zamir White, if Jacobs can play, they're going to play Jacobs. There is nobody in the backfield. They clearly don't care if they have anything in Zamir White, which was my hope coming into this season. Josh Jacobs, he may lose some passing work. He's going to get the volume. I think his knee injury is going to be fine. I am not panicking and taking Josh Jacobs out of my lineups moving forward this season. I am going to continue to start Josh Jacobs. I think this was Minnesota's defense is playing far better than what most people expect to get out of them. And Craig, apparently this last segment's for you, buddy. You have Josh Jacobs too. I'm going to keep starting him. Josh, how do you feel about it? Obviously, pay attention to the knee injury.
Yeah, I mean, you have to. Look, if Josh Jacobs is playing and you made the playoffs, Josh Jacobs helped carry you there despite his team's offense's deficiencies. Like, he's been just a very average back. But once again, as I talked about with Rachaad White, he's one of the only few that's actually been healthy starting every game this season.
And the volume, they do not
care. The volume is there, and they do not care. Like, he's one of the leaders on this team. He's one of the best offensive players on this team. He's going to tote the rock. They involve him in the passing game. He runs the football. The offensive line has been the issue on why he's only averaging 3.7 yards a carry this season.
Yeah.
Like, you play Josh Jacobs and just pray to God that Aiden O'Connell can help move this offense to where Jacobs can either bust off a 60-yard touchdown run or fall into the end zone in short yardage.
Yeah. All right, as we get to the end of the show, we got another comment. Make COD great again. First of all, love the name. Don't know if you messed with the new Warzone that came out last week. I'm enjoying it. So I think they may have improved it, certainly better than the initial map on Warzone. Josh doesn't care about any of this. He needs 16.3 PPR points, and he has to choose between Achane and Saquon for the dub. Josh, this is pressure because we talked about Achane is the ceiling play, and I think Saquon, much like Derrick Henry, the floor play. But that Giants offense it's Russian roulette, putting it bluntly, because you just don't know what they are going to do.
Yeah, and as we've talked about throughout the show, the Green Bay Packers have been red hot, and that defense has looked really good. On the downsides that I was able to sneak in like early Sunday morning for NPI, Saquon Barkley, I have outside of the top 10 at running back this week.
Interesting.
So that to me, I which honestly, the way that my downsides have gone lately, you probably do want to run with Barkley because I consistently lose on those. But
so I look at trends, and when you look at going back to week 6 when he came back from the injury, Saquon, 13 points, 18 points, 15 points, 14 points. His only 2 bad weeks have come in his last 3 games. 7 points with a 30-point performance against Washington, and then 6 points against New England. Now, obviously, New England
they know
does a good job.
Best player out. Yeah,
exactly. So, Josh, putting it bluntly, if I'm looking for 16 fantasy points, I'm going with Shane.
Yeah, 100%. I'm going and it's not particularly close. Like the way that Miami's offense is right now, like there's no reason to sit anyone maybe outside of like Jeff Wilson Jr.
Yeah,
like, let's be real.
I can agree with that. Craig, I do a waiver article every week for Club Fantasy at Club Fantasy FFL on Twitter. So if you have waiver questions, first of all, follow Josh or myself. You'll see our names here. Follow Club Fantasy. I'm more than happy if you want to DM me on Twitter. We're more than happy to help out. We also do Facebook Messenger. So we're always willing to help you out. We're getting towards the end of this show.
You know what? Throw comments on the videos too. I answer all of those.
Yeah, Josh works his way back through the comments on the videos too. So yeah, we're more than happy to help, man. But follow Josh at the One Hunsodian. Follow me at the Fantasy 5. But like I said, if you get it in here, we'll get you on here. Speaking of which, deep waivers. For this specific segment, we look for guys who are available in more than 90% of ESPN leagues. So guys who are almost certainly available in your league, no matter league size. Josh, I have to give you some credit. So Josh always collaborates with me on the waiver article if he sees things that I might have missed. And during the Monday night game last week, Josh, you were like, I don't know if you were planning on including Parker Washington, but I think you have to because he is balling with Christian Kirk out. Well, guess what?
And that was the big thing. It's the next man up mentality. Christian Kirk went down. We weren't sure how long he was going to be out. It came out that it was a core muscle injury and he needed surgery, and he's basically done for the season.
Yeah. And Washington did it again this week against the Cleveland Browns, a formidable defense. I am shocked that he did not get above 10% even after just last week's performance. Parker Washington is a guy that if you are looking for help at wide receiver, go get him. Josh touched on it. Chase Brown. I don't leave formidable running backs on waivers. Chase Brown is a formidable running back. And looking at the Cincinnati Bengals, clearly we're getting young tight ends involved. Tanner Hudson has taken over for Irv Smith, and Jake Browning loves him. If you are streaming tight ends, Tanner Hudson is a name to keep on your radar. I did throw Zamir White on here because we have to pay attention to what's happening with Josh Jacobs. If he's going to get the start, I don't leave starting running backs on waivers. And then finally, Josh, a name that I did not even have on my radar coming into the season. Davis Allen put in some work for the Rams against a good Ravens defense last week. And this is a situation where they know what they have in Tyler Higbee. There is no reason not to see if this kid is the truth. 5 targets, 4 catches, 50 yards, and a touchdown. I think Davis Allen is the guy who's going to need to be on streaming waivers moving forward, or streaming.
Yeah, moving forward. Tyler Higbee was out this past week. So
yes, out this week. But what I was getting is I don't think there's going to be a need to rush him back. Thank you.
No, of course not. No, absolutely. I mean, the Rams right now are just they're one of the youngest teams in the NFL. They need to be able to see, and a lot of the reason why Puka Nacua has kept right on going, why Tutu Atwell is still being involved, like why Kieran Williams is getting all of the run here at the running back position, why they moved off of Cam Akers finally. Like, they're young. They need to see how many of these guys they can build around in basically the twilight of Matt Stafford's career right now. Like, they sold the farm to get Stafford to win that championship.
They bought their Super Bowl, and I guarantee you they wouldn't.
And now they have to go through and build a football team. Yeah. And right now, the foundational pieces, Cooper Kupp, Aaron Donald, Matt Stafford, they're on the wrong side of 30. Donald is still playing really well. Cooper Kupp, the injuries have kind of bit him, but he had a great week on Sunday. Matt Stafford intermittently has looked like Matt Stafford.
Yeah.
So
certainly the last 3 weeks.
Exactly. Kieran Williams has been great. Puka Nacua has been great. The young kids are stepping up. Let's do the same thing with Davis Allen.
Josh, we talked about Parker Washington, but Craig wants to know, is there an upside on Calvin Ridley? I think there's a massive upside on a guy who had 13 targets this past week.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, for me, the pecking order is still going to be Evan Ingram, simply because that's the guy that Trevor Lawrence has the rapport from, building off of last season, right? That's why Christian Kirk has still been heavily targeted in this offense, because he built that rapport with him over last year. The same with Evan Ingram. With Calvin Ridley coming in, he's going to see an uptick in targets because Christian Kirk is out. Parker Washington will see some work, 100%. Ridley's week this week, definitely affected by the return of Denzel Ward.
Yep.
Let's put
he
that
also,
in position.
I caught a play of that game. He got pushed out on the 1 yard line. Almost had a touchdown in this game. Just
yeah, so Ridley's game would have been a lot better, sure, had he actually reached the football over.
Yep,
so,
exactly.
You know, I'm not really worried about Ridley over the stretch run. Let me actually see what Jacksonville plays the rest of the season. Last 3 weeks, the Jaguars have the Ravens Sunday night at the Bucks, which that's going to be a field.
There you go. You don't have to say anything else. Week 16, Calvin Ridley, wide receiver 1.
Yeah, you're not kidding. And then then versus the Panthers in championship week.
And we've talked about that, where the Panthers feel like they should be a great matchup, but they just get run on.
So Travis Etienne, RB1, week 17, baby.
There you go. Jaguars about to win some people some championships. All right, Josh, we've talked about Monday Miracles all day. Two games tonight. Thank you to the NFL. Very much a change of story from what we were bitching about last week. I love it. I think this is actually a great idea for the last day of the fantasy playoffs. I don't know if they did this for that reason, but I think they did, and I love it. Titans at Dolphins. Dolphins are 13-point favorites. Over-under on this game is 46.5. Packers at Giants. We talked about how hot the Packers are. Over-under on this game. Packers are 6.5-point road favorites. Over-under on this game. I think they're learning something from the Chicago-Minnesota game. 36.5 is the over-under on this absolutely putrid game. Josh, how do you see these games going?
So real quick, the line on Titans Dolphins has actually moved to -14. So they're now 2 touchdown favorites. And then the Packers Giants, the line has moved to Green Bay -6.
Okay. So people are betting the Giants in the
correct,
the bookies don't like it.
That's fool's gold. Let's be honest. The Packers are winning this game. For the Dolphins, honestly, they might score 47 themselves.
Yep.
So I'm going to take the over on the points. And I don't like betting lines that high, so I probably wouldn't do.
I wouldn't touch it. I certainly
wouldn't
wouldn't take
spread.
It. Exactly.
But I mean, if I had money to blow and it wouldn't kill me if I did, I wouldn't mind betting Miami -14, because Will Levis, look, he's looked good in spurts. DeAndre Hopkins against Jalen Ramsey is going to be so much fun to watch. But yeah, I mean, I think both of them, it's Miami on both. And then for Packers Giants, Packers are definitely going to win. I don't know that I take the over, but I'd be more willing to bet the spread on that one, where it's the opposite for me in the Miami.
So there's weather rolling into New York right now-ish, basically. It's not hitting Albany, but New York Giants play about 3 hours south of me. So I'll be interested to see how that could affect this game. I bet the under on weather games every time, and it's worked out really, really well for me. Our resident bettor, Joel, says, beware of the home dog on a Monday night. So there's a lot going on there. Here's what I would tell you, Josh, just to go back to that Miami game. If I told you that Derrick Henry scored a touchdown on the first 2 plays of the game somehow. So turnover, Derrick Henry, turnover, Derrick Henry. The Titans are up 14-0. You'd be like, yeah, the Dolphins are still winning this game. Give me the Dolphins -14 with no problem. I am not worried about the Dolphins -14. And I will take the over on that game as well, because the Dolphins could do it on their own. I am going to take I'm going to pay attention to the weather. I would take Packers money line, which probably isn't paying that well. 6 points. I feel pretty good about it. But I'm really interested in the over-under. I'd be more interested in the weather there. Folks, we have kept you way longer than we normally like to. The folks who rode with us this show, you guys are legends. Absolutely. We appreciate you guys. Follow Club Fantasy at Club Fantasy FFL on all the socials. You find our articles on clubfantasyffl.com. You find Josh at the One Hunsody and me at the Fantasy 5. We appreciate you guys. I hope your Monday miracles come true. And thanks for riding with us for 90 minutes. Good luck.